Shocking oversight. Carney linked to carbon firm profiting off his net zero agenda? Mark Carney's unexpected rise to become Canada's Prime Minister after the snap federal election on April 28, 2025, sent waves through the political landscape. Known for his previous roles as Governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Carney brought an international finance reputation into Canadian politics. His bold commitment to net zero emissions and climate innovation has been widely praised by environmentalists and economists alike. Yet, as he steps into the highest office, questions about his financial entanglements have cast a shadow over his leadership. Revelations about his investments in carbon capture firms, notably Occidental Petroleum, have sparked a national debate on the integrity of his net zero agenda. The core issue is whether Carney's personal financial interests intersect too closely with the policies he now promotes at the federal level. Occidental Petroleum, a major American oil and gas company, attracted attention in 2023 when it acquired Canadian company Carbon Engineering for a reported $1.1 billion. Carbon Engineering is a leader in direct air capture, DAC, technology, which extracts carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, a potentially game-changing tool in the fight against climate change. This deal is significant because Carney was instrumental in shaping the voluntary carbon market frameworks that directly benefit companies like Occidental. His initiatives, including the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ, and the Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets, TSVCM, created the financial and regulatory environment that makes carbon credits lucrative. Critics argue this overlap raises serious questions about conflicts of interest, given Carney's financial holdings in firms connected to this ecosystem. Carney's role in GFANZ placed him at the epicenter of global efforts to mobilize capital for climate solutions. Co-founded with influential figures such as Michael Bloomberg, GFANZ encourages banks, insurers, and investors to support projects that reduce emissions, often by purchasing carbon credits from companies engaged in carbon capture and removal. Occidental, through its partnerships with Carbon Engineering and 1.5, is a major seller of such credits, securing deals with multinational giants like Microsoft, JP Chase, and TD Bank. These carbon credit transactions generate significant revenue streams, supported by the market mechanisms and standards that Carney helped design. This web of financial and regulatory influence blurs the line between public policy leadership and private gain. Despite increasing skepticism about the effectiveness and transparency of voluntary carbon markets, Occidental has doubled down on its carbon capture ambitions. The company recently inaugurated the world's largest direct air capture facility in Texas, funded in part by a $500 million grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. With plans to build 100 similar plants by 2035, Occidental's expansion signals strong confidence in the future of carbon capture as a core climate strategy. This expansion is closely aligned with Carney's vision of leveraging financial innovation to drive decarbonization, making the relationship between his policies and investments even more scrutinized. Critics highlight the disparity between Carney's financial portfolio and his political platform. With less than 2% of his investments held in Canadian companies, the vast majority of Carney's financial assets are linked to global corporations and investment vehicles like Brookfield Corporation and Brookfield Asset Management. Carney's previous role as vice chair at Brookfield, where he advanced ESG, environmental, social, and governance, investment initiatives, adds further complexity. Brookfield's close ties to major banks, including TD Bank, a key participant in carbon credit purchases, deepen concerns that Carney's climate leadership may be entangled with private sector interests rather than purely public goals. The voluntary carbon market system that Carney championed has faced notable pushback from within the financial sector. After GFANZ released ambitious guidelines aimed at phasing out financing for fossil fuels, major banks such as JP Chase and Bank of America pushed back, citing concerns over regulatory overreach and possible antitrust violations. This resistance led some financial institutions to distance themselves from the alliance, undermining Carney's efforts and exposing the difficulties of implementing sweeping climate finance reforms in a globalized economy driven by competing interests. Still, companies like Occidental have pressed forward with their carbon capture strategies, benefiting from frameworks Carney helped put in place. This continuation has intensified accusations of ethical conflicts. Critics argue that Carney could have instructed his asset managers to exclude firms directly profiting from the policies he advocates, or at least recused himself from decisions affecting those sectors. The absence of such measures fuels ongoing debates about governance and transparency, challenging Carney's commitment to avoiding conflicts of interest. Calls for Carney to divest from these holdings have grown louder, especially among opposition politicians, environmental groups, and watchdog organizations. They contend that, at minimum, Carney must abstain from influencing policies related to carbon markets and energy, where he holds financial stakes. Public confidence, they argue, hinges on leaders who are not only transparent, but also demonstrably free from conflicts that could compromise their decisions during this critical period of Canada's climate transition. Supporters of Carney emphasize his unparalleled expertise in global finance and climate policy as assets that position Canada to accelerate its net zero goals. They stress that Carney's investments are managed independently, and there is no direct evidence that his financial holdings bias his policymaking. From their perspective, conflating financial management with governance undermines the need for experienced leadership in complex climate and economic arenas. They urge the public to focus on outcomes rather than speculative conflicts. The controversy surrounding Carney is emblematic of a broader challenge facing political leaders globally, balancing personal financial interests with public responsibilities in a rapidly evolving climate finance landscape. The stakes in Canada's energy and environmental policies have never been higher, and successful leadership will require not only bold policy decisions, but also an unassailable commitment to integrity and transparency to maintain public trust. As scrutiny of Carney's financial entanglements continues, it reflects Canadians' growing demand for ethical governance that aligns policy rhetoric with personal conduct. The public's trust in Canada's climate strategy depends not just on ambitious targets, but on the belief that those setting and implementing policies do so without undue influence from private financial interests. Ultimately, how Carney navigates this complex web of finance and policy will shape both his political legacy and Canada's path toward sustainability. The ongoing debate about his investments in carbon capture companies and his leadership of voluntary carbon markets will remain a critical test of political accountability as Canada confronts its environmental and economic future.